We have 3 more causes to add to the thermometer before our test that's coming up. So let's get out that thermometer and let's see how Boston reacted to the coercive acts. Our 12th cause of the American Revolution are the events that happened at Lexington and Concord. With the passage of the Coercive or Intolerable Acts, Great Britain had decided to station thousands more redcoats or British troops in the Boston area. As those Boston troops began arriving, they become very leery of the American militia, specifically the militia that was gathering outside of Massachusetts. In April 1775, they decided to take action to prevent that militia from being able to do anything against the redcoats. They decided to leave Boston and head to Concord, where they believed, rightfully, that the militia was hiding much of its weapons and gunpowder. The British decide to leave Boston and head to Concord. Word is spread quickly that the British are indeed coming. At Lexington, halfway between Concord and Boston, the militia gathers in an attempt to slow down the British so that the colonists behind them might prepare. You have 60 colonists standing there, blacksmiths, farmers. What they are not is seasoned soldiers. What are they facing across the field? 900 redcoats, experienced men who train daily for situations just like this. It's a scary situation. Here we have the farmer, the colonist, taking on the biggest, baddest army in the world right in the middle of the field. No one knows who or why or how, but a shot is heard. The British interpret this shot to be an attack. They are going to then open fire, and within seconds, 8 colonists from Lexington are going to be dead. The rest of the colonists will then clear the field. They've accomplished their mission. They've slowed the British down. The British will then advance on to Concord. By then, because of the action of the men in Lexington, the armory in Concord will be empty. The British, upset at what has taken place, now have to turn back and do a full day's march back to Boston. It's not going to be a simple march. Because of the 8 colonists that have been killed, word is quickly spread to all of the other militia throughout Massachusetts. Come, British are firing on colonists. The entire march back to Boston, British soldiers are constantly having to turn and stop and turn and stop and look into the woods, because from both sides of the road, colonists are going to be opening fire on them. After hours and hours of a treacherous hike back, over 270 British soldiers, officers, and regular infantrymen will either be killed or injured. The Americans will have successfully tired out the British. But there's a new problem. The Americans have not simply petitioned. The Americans have not simply tarred and feathered a tax collector. They have now opened fire and killed British soldiers, representatives of the king. Our 13th cause of the American Revolution is the Olive Branch Petition. With the firing on British soldiers, Americans recognized we have a situation we're going to need to deal with. And so a Second Continental Congress is going to be called. At that Congress, for the first time, the Sons of Liberty representatives are going to argue for an out-and-out revolution. Not all of the colonies agree, however, specifically Pennsylvania. And Pennsylvania will successfully convince other colonies to vote for one last attempt to petition the king. This is the Olive Branch Petition. In this letter written to the king, all the colonies say, "King, we are loyal to you. All that we ask is that you get rid of the coercive acts." And the colonists agreed to send this letter. Not all of them agreed with the idea. However, they agreed to send it because they felt it wouldn't hurt anything. It wasn't going to change the current situation. They had a good idea of what the king's reaction would be. Our 14th and last cause of the American Revolution is going to be really the first battle, the Battle of Bunker Hill, in parentheses, Breed's Hill. The Americans recognize that with more redcoats arriving and the port being closed off, they're going to have a challenge fairly soon as more and more soldiers come. The British recognize that having so many colonists near them, fully armed, is also a problem. In the city of Boston, the colonists actually have the high ground, while the British redcoats are down by the port. The British decide that that's something that must change. On June 17, 1775, the British send what is essentially their Marines up the hill to try and evacuate or evict the Americans from their position. It's going to take them 3 assaults, and it's going to cost them 3 times the amount of men that the Americans will lose in the end. But the British will eventually take Bunker and Breed's Hill. The point is, however, that the Americans showed that they would fight. Their problems were very simple. They didn't have the supplies or the training. That's going to change, however, as word gets out of what takes place at Bunker and Breed's Hill. George Washington is already en route to take over the forces and to begin a training regiment, and the other colonies are sending more men and more guns. The king, however, once hearing that once again his forces have been shot upon, decides that it's time to take a different stance with the colonies. He's no longer going to refer to them as the colonies, but instead he's going to claim that they are now a foreign enemy, that rids them of any protections whatsoever as his king. Now that we are actually at war, it's probably important to share the 3 different groups of people involved in the colonies at this time. First, we will have the Patriots. They make up roughly 1/3 of the population, and most of them coming from the New England colonies. These are people who are beginning to support the idea of revolution. We also have about 1/3 of the colonies that are loyalists. These are people who wish to stay within the king's protection. They still want to be British. They are fine with the British rules as they are. And then you have 1/3 that is undecided. This is the 1/3 that both sides are going to vie for and try and convince throughout the duration of the war. The problem is, quite often, the undecided is going to change allegiance throughout the war, depending on who's occupying their territory. I will save that, however, for when we actually get to the battles of the Revolutionary War.